In Silicon Valley, power usually looks a certain way. Big personalities, big egos, big platforms. But sometimes power hides in plain sight. In 2011, Twitter tried to poach a quiet executive from Google to be chief product officer under Jack Dorsey. He wasn't a public figure, he didn't post online, most people in tech didn't even know he existed. Yet one former Googler called him the most powerful man in advertising you've never heard of. But Google knew exactly who he was, and to keep him, they paid $100 million. Not to make him CEO, not to build a moonshot, just to keep him in the room. His name is Neal Mohan, and today he runs YouTube, a platform with over 2.7 billion users and more than $40 billion in ad revenue. Which is strange, because for someone running the world's biggest video platform, he isn't a creator. He isn't a public figure, and until recently, he rarely stepped into the spotlight. While the rest of Silicon Valley built personal brands, Neal quietly built the platform they rely on. He architected YouTube TV, launched Shorts, and helped build a creator economy that's paid out over $50 billion in just 3 years. But to understand how he got here, how a kid from Lucknow became one of the most powerful people in media, you have to go back. To a childhood split between Michigan and India, to a Stanford engineer who coded chemistry software for fun, and to the 400-page PowerPoint deck that he co-authored, turning a faltering business into a $3.1 billion acquisition. Because this isn't a story about fame, it's about structure, control, and what happens when a platform built for creativity is run by someone who isn't a creator. Chapter 1. The Outsider. By his own admission, Neal mentions his dad showed up to JFK with only $25 in his pocket. He asked a random passerby the fastest way to get to Lafayette, Indiana, and the stranger put him on a Greyhound, and the rest was history. In 1985, when Neal was 12, the family moved back to India, not just across states, but across cultures. They settled in Lucknow, where his parents were originally from, a city steeped in tradition, language, and pace that couldn't have felt further from small-town Michigan. He didn't speak Hindi, he couldn't read the cues, he was in every single way out of place.
It's really about not just surviving, it's about thriving through those types of pivotal moments.
But that wasn't the first time he'd felt like an outsider.
You know, there was like 2 Indian kids in the entire school district. The other one also happened to be named Neal. I think I was a little bit better at baseball than he was. But
he adapted, he had to, and in that process, navigating identity, absorbing difference, something shifted. He began to see the world not as a series of disruptions, but as systems to be understood. In 1992, he returns to the US to study electrical engineering at Stanford. Not business, not entrepreneurship, electrical engineering. He took additional coursework in computer science and chemistry.
You know, I remember I started this software company when I was in high school.
And one of his earliest projects was writing molecular visualization software for researchers, tools built not for consumers, but for the people who built tools themselves.
True, like Nerd Nation, Stanford was like nerd upon nerd. It was like basically software to teach people organic chemistry.
While his peers chased product market fit, he built infrastructure. After graduating in 1996, he joined Accenture as a consultant, but didn't stay long. A year later, in 1997, he joined a small Silicon Valley startup called NetGravity, making $60,000 a year as a senior analyst. His job was to support clients using NetGravity's ad server product. But even early on, the people around him began to notice how quickly he went from surface to system. And that was Mohan's superpower, absorbing complexity fast and converting it into leverage. In November 1997, NetGravity was acquired by DoubleClick, and so Mohan moves from California to New York. And that's when everything changes. Chapter 2. The Architect. By the late 1990s, DoubleClick had become one of the most important players in online advertising. They weren't building social networks or flashy consumer apps, they were building the plumbing, ad servers, measurement tools, targeting infrastructure, the invisible backbone that powered the entire internet. By this point at DoubleClick, Mohan has a newly created title, Director of Global Client Services. On paper, it was a step up, but in practice, it was a crash course. Mohan was managing 40 people in 5 different countries and overseeing hundreds of high-stake client relationships. But as always, he moved quickly and quietly. Internally, he was widely viewed as David Rosenblatt's right-hand man, the engine behind the product roadmap.
And at the same time, I've always been a technologist at heart, right?
In 2005, Mohan and Rosenblatt created something wild. Not a pitch deck, but a product manifesto. It laid out a bold pivot. Stop thinking of DoubleClick as an ad server and start thinking of it as an exchange, a centralized automated marketplace for digital advertising. They weren't selling vision, they were selling infrastructure, forecasting layers, scaled revenue models, engineering diagrams, but a decade ahead of its time.
DoubleClick was kind of operating system of the internet economy, at least as far as, you know, the fact that it's powered through advertising.
Over the next 2 years, DoubleClick executed the plan almost to the letter. And in 2007, Google came knocking. At the time, Google's ad business was still rooted in search, text links, keywords, but DoubleClick had the tools and the roadmap to dominate display, video, and everything in between. Google acquired DoubleClick for $3.1 billion, its largest acquisition to date. By then, other companies had already started circling, trying to poach Mohan. But Google knew what they had. Mohan hadn't just joined Google, he'd brought his blueprint with him. Not because he was flashy, not because he had a big online following, but because the entire system Google had just bought was built on his slides. By 2008, Mohan had risen to SVP of display and video ads at Google, leading one of the company's most profitable arms. But then he made another pivot, this time to YouTube. The platform had just been acquired by Google. It was messy, viral, untamed. There were creators, but no creator economy. There were views, but no business model. And Mohan's job was to turn the chaos into a system. Over the next decade, Mohan oversaw nearly every major monetization product that YouTube launched. Internally, he was known as the monetization guy.
Come around 2015, Susan Wojcicki, my good friend, she was over at YouTube and she said, hey, do you want to come over and help, build products at YouTube? And so, of course, I jumped at that opportunity.
He helped turn ads into something users could choose and advertisers could trust. And in 2017, he launched YouTube TV, expanding the platform into live sports and traditional television. He pushed into mobile, built out measurement, and eventually launched YouTube Shorts, a direct answer to TikTok.
Shorts, I think, has just surpassed 70 billion views a day.
On paper, it worked. Since 2020, YouTube has paid out more than $50 billion to its creators. But structure came with a cost. As monetization scaled, so did rules. Creators had to adjust, not just to new formats, but to a new way of thinking. Thumbnails, retention, watch time. Some called it strategy, others called it survival. And the algorithm became both mentor and master. A guide for growth, but also a warning to never step out of line. Then came demonetization, advertiser boycotts, family-friendly filters, content policing on a scale no platform had ever attempted.
It's about giving everybody in the world a voice and showing everybody the world.
But now that voice came with conditions, and YouTube's feedback loop wasn't accidental. It mirrored Mohan's mindset. Data over gut, systems over stories. Slowly a question began to emerge. Was YouTube still a platform for its creators, or was it a platform for advertisers, built by engineers? In 2011, Twitter offered Neal Mohan the role of Chief Product Officer, directly under Jack Dorsey. Around the same time, Facebook also tried to recruit him. These offers were serious. Equity, vision, a seat at the table. But for Google, it wasn't just about losing an executive. It was about losing an entire system. He had become the chief architect of Google's entire ad business. So Google made a move. They offered him $100 million in stock. Not to become CEO, not to launch some revolutionary new product, just to keep him. And that's when Business Insider called him Google's $100 million man. And the impact just kept on coming. Over the next decade, he became one of the most powerful people at Google, the connective tissue between YouTube, ads, and creators. He wasn't loud, he didn't post, but little by little, creators began to feel his presence. Not through his words, but again, through his systems. The dashboards, the recommendations, the ever-changing rules of monetization. Then, in 2023, YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki stepped down. And for the first time, the face of the platform, the person most creators associated YouTube with, disappeared. In her place, Mohan stepped in. But by then, creators weren't sure who was listening anymore. YouTube had become a platform optimized for metrics, for advertisers, for scale. And Neal Mohan, the systems thinker from Lucknow, was now at the very top. Which raises the final question. Can a platform built for creativity be run by someone who isn't a creator? Can it really tell the stories that matter? Neal Mohan didn't invent YouTube. He didn't build its culture, and he most certainly didn't build a career on camera. But he did something just as defining. He made YouTube stable. He made it predictable, and most importantly, sustainable. And maybe that's exactly what it needed. A platform as big as YouTube can't run on vibes and viral hits alone. It needs systems, guardrails, strategy. Otherwise, it breaks down under its own weight. But with every system you design, something always gets left out. The weird, the risky, that raw, unpolished energy that made the platform special in the first place. Today, YouTube isn't broken. It's functioning, maybe even better than ever, depending on who you asked. More revenue, more structure, more scale. But it's also more sanitized, more ad-friendly, more optimized. And that optimization came from someone who never even tried to be a creator himself. That's not a flaw, it's the point. Because in the end, Neal Mohan didn't ruin YouTube, he rationalized it. He turned it from a cultural experiment to a platform that could actually last. What happens when the most powerful platform for creativity is led by someone who's never had to create for it? Is that the reason YouTube works? Or is that the reason it doesn't feel like it used to? That's the tension at the heart of Neal Mohan's story, and maybe the story of YouTube itself.